And I'm Lindsay Musgrove. I'm a new graduate nurse, and I recently did a lot of research about couplet care and rooming in, and I've found that all of the leading pediatric and obstetric foundations support this practice. So there are a lot of benefits for both mother and baby. For the mother, you can start forming a routine with your baby. You learn to sleep in chunks as your baby naps. You have less anxiety about your baby being out of your sight, so you actually are able to sleep better and deeper than when you send your baby to the nursery. This is a great way to have successful breastfeeding. You're always there with your baby. You can learn your baby's cues and needs when they need to feed, when they need diapering, when they need rest.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of Nerd Chronicles, which hosts a socially awkward nerd, Christian Paul, speaking. And ladies and gentlemen, the block has been extremely hot regarding the whole Lindsay Clancy case regarding insanity as well as mental health, especially regarding postpartum depression or any other type of postpartum mental illness that mothers are actually mainly dealing with whenever they become new moms or whenever they give birth shortly after actually have given birth to new children. It has been mainly insane, and it is a very complex topic that definitely needs to be best discussed, definitely with the people that actually lived it, and also the people that basically diagnosed it, treated, the whole 9 yards, people that actually just well known regarding this whole deal, their expertise in this. It is a very complex topic to actually mainly tackle. Now, the main concern that I actually wanted to deal with in a situation like this is I hear videos saying that, oh, the patriarchy failed Lindsay Clancy. Oh, the patriarchy failed Lindsay Clancy and the 3 children. The matriarchy is under attack. The matriarchy is causing issues. And I really want to tell y'all guys something. The patriarchy, nor the matriarchy, okay, has literally nothing to do with Lindsay Clancy currently being non-child for offing her 3 little innocent children. Nothing. It has fucking nothing to do with it. And I'm really incensed by at least some of the videos that I saw. One, I'm going to show you right how everything really brought to my attention, and that's what really forced me to actually come out and actually make this video today. And if you don't believe in what I'm saying, here's a video to literally show y'all.
Being useful to a man will ruin your life, period. Having kids with a man under patriarchy is the biggest gamble you will take. Because again, it is not meant to serve and protect women. At the very best, he was negligent. People don't understand. Women are driven to the brinks of insanity by these incompetent, useless men. Enter relationships with women to have access to their bodies, to have the cool girl that they were promised, to get a servant disguised as romantic destiny. She was a brilliant nurse. It was really for women, for women's health. She was really on her way to making such a mark in that field, making new discoveries. With all her indoctrination, was doing everything for him, being the perfect wife, wifey material. I guarantee you this guy checked out way before, as soon as she stopped being the cool girl. He found a shinier, new cool girl. He gets to move on, and she is stuck in a nightmare. 4 months after his 3 kids were unalived, he gets remarried. Hello? The second that they become inconvenient, a fully formed, complex, autonomous human being, that's when the men piece the fuck out. And then when they snap, it's always on the woman. Again, it's all on the woman. That's the point. That's why you need to be the most useless woman in the world, to ensure that the guy loves you for you and not for what you can provide for him. Men will be like, in sickness and in health. Yeah, okay. Men will say those words, but they only mean in health. This is why I love these films. They really expose the entity of marriage and its true purpose, which is to keep you in that sunken place 9 times out of 10. Because if marriage benefited women, it would be illegal. First of all. Second of all, motherhood. A woman sacrificing her body, her life, her mental health to give birth, to create life. It is so undervalued. It is so unappreciated. Postpartum depression is very common. It doesn't have to end in postpartum psychosis for it to ruin your life. Conservatives preach to want to protect life until that life is actually born. Then it's nothing to do with us. In our society, the mother is most of the times on her own because, again, women enter these unions with men under the guise of having a partner. He's entering it to receive a wife and kids, not to be a husband and father. Two very different things, right? Women are under this cool girl propaganda indoctrination since birth. We are trained to make men's lives easier, to sacrifice our dreams for his. This is why it's a humiliation ritual. Now women are becoming the breadwinners, or they're having full-time jobs while still serving, making a man's life easier, doing everything to ensure he's okay. And this is why these men are entering these marriages and having kids with women. They want their genes passed down. They're not thinking, how do I make my wife's life easier? Women's lives are ruined. They are left alone. They're left with their own agony and depression and despair. You are one of the exceptions. Incredible. My mom has a beautiful marriage. She's the first one to tell you this. Is that serious? He fired the nanny as soon as she took her leave of absence because she could not physically work anymore, because that's how bad her depression got. And the thing is, this is so common, like, women are not supported. This is all because of pregnancy, which you should be getting the most amount of help and empathy. Women are just discarded. It's so unsafe. It's so unsafe to have kids with these men. Like, you need to be so fucking careful. More that she needed from him after giving and creating life, the more he was like, started checking out. That's exactly what happened. He did not give a fuck. You guys have to understand that. Like, these men are not going to care as soon as you stop being that role that they expect you to be.
So as you can see, ladies and gentlemen, what we saw on that video literally just killed a bunch of brain cells and just literally just rotted some of the brains that actually just started thinking myself, like, what the fuck is this bitch on? You know what I'm saying? It's just straight foolishness, and more than likely it's all to do to actually preserve and fuel an agenda that's really going to strictly benefit her and people that think like that woman that you see up in that video right there. But before I really thoroughly go in on this woman, let's try and look into the quick glance and the quick history on how Lindsay Clancy mainly put herself in that position.
There are all different kinds of thoughts that someone could have been having. The only person that would know that is her.
A tragedy in Massachusetts, as prosecutors say a mother killed her 3 young children before attempting her own suicide.
And she wasn't the first, and she won't be the last.
On January 24th, 5-year-old Cora, 3-year-old Dawson, and 8-month-old Callan were found with obvious signs of trauma in their Duxbury home. Cora and Dawson were pronounced dead at the hospital, and Callan died 3 days later. While a cause of death has not officially been determined, the district attorney's office says, quote, "It appears the children were strangled." Their mother, 32-year-old Lindsay Clancy, attempted suicide by jumping out of a second-story window. She now faces multiple charges, including 2 counts of murder and 3 counts of strangulation or suffocation. Forensic psychologist Dr. John Delatory says Clancy was likely suffering from postpartum depression, or the more severe postpartum psychosis.
If she's experiencing psychosis, it's psychosis. It doesn't generally matter when it started or how it started. This is psychosis. Did she actually know right from wrong at the time of the offense? I don't know. It's certainly possible. It's certainly worth, at least evaluating. Were these individuals, whoever commits these kinds of crimes, and again, she wasn't the first, and she won't be the last.
Dr. Delatory says 1 in 5 women experience postpartum depression after giving birth. The more rare diagnosis of postpartum psychosis could mean more intense symptoms.
believing things that aren't true, seeing things that aren't there, hearing things that aren't there. All of these kinds of things, again, they tax the individual's ability to cope.
Dr. Delatorre says there are a range of beliefs Clancy could have had to justify her actions.
She could absolutely be thinking that they can't live without me, so then they must come with me. She could have been having suicidal ideation. Then the idea of leaving her kids without their mother would have been too traumatizing for her. So essentially, she takes them out first. There could be that she thought that there were demons inside of them, that she was performing a behavior that would alleviate that kind of issue. There are all different kinds of thoughts that someone could have been having. The only person that would know that is her.
In a statement on his family's GoFundMe page, Patrick Clancy wrote about his wife saying, quote, "I want to ask all of you that you find it deep within yourselves to forgive Lindsay as I have. The real Lindsay was generously loving and caring towards everyone. Me, our kids, family, friends, and her patients." Dr. Delatorre says Patrick Clancy likely saw some warning signs in his wife before their children were killed.
I don't know if it's possible that he didn't see. Maybe he didn't recognize that they were more intense than they had been previously.
It's possible that he too could be charged in the case.
Should the father be held responsible for it? I mean, that's placing a lot of emphasis on someone else being a mind reader. Essentially, if she's hiding stuff from him, how is he going to know that she's suffering? So I don't know. It really is up to the district attorney and how they want to proceed with this, but it's certainly possible.
As for Lindsay Clancy's charges, Dr. Delatorre says an insanity defense could be the best option. He says the first steps in her defense would be determining whether psychosis existed.
What was really going on at the time of the alleged offense inside the person's mind? What emotional state were they in? Were they actually experiencing these kinds of things? And how were they experiencing them? It's certainly possible that malingering, that someone is feigning these kinds of symptoms in order to escape, responsibility. That exists as well.
Right now, Lindsay Clancy is being held in a Boston hospital. She's expected to be arraigned after she is released. Reporting for Law and Crime Network, I'm Sierra Gillespie.
So Lindsay Clancy, ladies and gentlemen, is currently on trial for the murder of her 3 kids, as well as her now ex-husband's, Patrick Clancy's 3 kids, 5-year-old Cora, 3-year-old Donson, and 8-month-old Callan, in which she murdered them all on January 24th, 2023, via asphyxiation and strangulation, via elastic bands and exercise bands. You know, the bands that you use to actually mainly stretch yourself out and do workout bands with, rotate your arms with. Those are the bands that you mainly use when doing like plyometrics. Those bands were used by Lindsay to strangle her kids to death. And once all of that has been complete, she has slit her wrists. She has attempted to commit suicide, try to do self-deletion, slice the neck, and attempt to fall down from the 2nd-story window of the old house that they used to live, and attempt to fall to her death, end up being paralyzed from waist down, and somehow surviving the fall, and somehow surviving the incident. And all of this, ladies and gentlemen, took place on January 24th, 2023, and it began up in the trial began up in Plymouth County Superior Court, based on what they're saying, right? So they have the DAs up in Plymouth County argue that Clancy acted with deliberate premeditation, calling the actions intentional, rational, and swift. And we know the case had drawn massive national attention, creating a sharp divide between the prosecuting and defense arguments, and it got a lot of attention towards many suburban white women that have been watching the case. And we're going to bring up Ray Stephanie later on this video regarding this, and we're going to explain why. Okay? Prosecution claims meditation. Defense claims that Lindsay was suffering from bipolar disorder and postpartum psychosis, in which a rare and a severe condition that actually altered her reality, in which they see her voices instructing her to basically off herself as well as her children, which is a utterly despicable thing to literally do. And it's a shame that we have to actually mainly focus on them while not actually putting the sole focus on children in the first place. And medical testimony has revealed a very difficult history of Lindsay desperately seeking help for escalating mental health struggles following the birth of the youngest child. The 5 months leading up to the tragedy, she was issued over 30 medications for a changing cocktail of 13 different psychiatric medications, treating severe anxiety, panic, and persistent insomnia. And was the journal entries in court detailed a state of extreme depression and severe brain fog, while she had voluntarily checked herself into a psychiatric facility just weeks prior on New Year's Eve. Her family and attorneys claim the condition only worsened under the heavily mixed medications. The ex-husband, Patrick, testified for the prosecution, walking the jury through the harrowing timeline of finding his family in his devastating 911 call. He testified despite our ongoing battles with anxiety and insomnia, she had appeared to be having one of her best days on the morning of January 24th. And he also said while she extensively documented suicidal ideation providers, she never mentioned hurting the children or in voice till after the event occurred. Days after the tragedy, Patrick is publicly saying forgiving his wife, describing her as a loving mom whose condition is rapidly deteriorated. And the block has been extremely hot as well as extremely juicy. Now, my next question for AI is, did Lindsay Clancy still work as a full-time nurse until January 24th? Let me make sure I get everything all edited, and then we gonna ask AI, see what they say. Let's see it. No, Lindsay Clancy was not actively working as a full-time nurse up until January 24th, 2023. While she was still officially employed as a labor and delivery nurse at Massachusetts General Hospital, she had been on extended maternity leave and strategically reduced her hours due to escalating mental health struggles. Makes sense. May 2022, birth of the third child. Clancy went on maternity leave. September 22, planned to return to work. And he faced a scheduled return to nursing role. She experienced severe increased anxiety. And that's when the medication started to actually pile up. And we're going to actually deal with those medication guidelines, dealing with those whole ordeal. Late 2022 comes in, says not to return. Clancy went from Lindsay's birth and next week. She's not planning to go out to work because she's not a man state to take care of patients. Hey, I'll give her that. December 22nd, January 2023. Court documents from subsequent laws show she was formerly unable to work due to debilitating postpartum depression and anxiety. And then that's when she was dealing with the intensive psychiatric medications regarding that. So now let's deal with the medication that has been given. So let's definitely get ourselves out of the way. And then we are going to go into the history regarding the medication. So let's look into what we have. September 15th, 2022. Start on sertraline, Zoloft 25 milligrams, prescribed by Dr. Jennifer Tufts for postpartum anxiety. October 21st, October 26th, 2022. Losartan, Avian, and hydroxyzine, Benadryl were added, alongside increased losartan due to dose and buspirone for escalating anxiety, basically with the same doctor. She changed 7 doctors in November 16, 2022. Trazodone was introduced for sleep by Dr. Kayvon. Izampana, Fluoxetine, Prozac was prescribed by nurse practitioner Julie Paul. Another different petitioner later told stop reporting feeling spaced out. Zolpidem, Mercepline, Remeron, and Clostebon were in rapid succession. Quetiapine, Seroquel, 25 milligrams, starring the psychiatric nurse practitioner Rebecca Delata, was Clancy message about regarding intrusive thoughts and hopelessness. December 6th to December 13th, 2022. Valium was prescribed at varying doses by Jalad masculine activity. She switched back to Dr. Tufts with lamotrigine, Lamotrigine 25 milligrams, and Seroquel dosage was significantly increased, moving up to quetiapine ER 300 milligrams before being stepped back down subsequent days. Now that following the inpatient stay at McLean Hospital, trazodone and losartan were re-prescribed by Dr. Alia Goodhart. Diazepam an increased dose of trazodone, 150 milligrams, were prescribed by Dr. Tufts. Goes back to her again. And then they had continued dosage of diazepam alongside the addition of amitriptyline 10 milligrams on January 16th, with the final diazepam prescription filled on January 23rd, just one day before the unalivings. A lot of juiciness, ladies and gentlemen. Now, this is where shit really gets messy regarding this whole ordeal. Miss Lindsay here, while she was dealing with her medications, she's been searching about hallucinations, psychosis, and ways to die. Okay? And you see in this article from ABC News, ladies and gentlemen, she's been searching online about hallucinations, psychosis, and the side effects of several drugs she was prescribed in the weeks before she strangled her 3 young children in January 2023, in which Lindsay looked up suicide methods, bipolar disorder, and insomnia at the end of December 2022, and in January went in search of information on postpartum depression, in which she also wrote a detailed note in October 2022 expressing doubts about her parenting choices, second-guessing her decision to stop breastfeeding her 8-month-old and reconsidering plans for a 4th child. Defense claims that she was in the grip of bipolar depression and postpartum psychosis, which is very, very rare, in which the forensic psychiatrists within their defense team diagnosed Clancy with those conditions following the killings. In her note, the now 36-year-old former labor and delivery nurse seemed most concerned with not being able to give her youngest child the same attention as the first 2, which is ages 3 and 5. And she said that she's terrified of something happening to her kids or doing something wrong to mess with their development. Our generation is inundated with information about every aspect of parenting. It's insane. For the last 5 years, I've just filled my mind with things, all things parenting, and it's just unhealthy. And then Lindsay pleaded not guilty, blah, 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 and all the stuff that was there. And text messages with her now ex-husband, Patrick Clancy, still on juggling routines of parenthood. Massachusetts State Police cell phone forensic expert Tim Chiappini read aloud texts between them for the day of the killings. They checked in on each other, and Lindsay Clancy expressed relief that one of their children's kidneys were okay. They were also focused to the children. And Patrick said, "You're a good mama." Prompting Lindsay Clancy to respond with a heart smile emoji. And the block has been very hard. And note, ladies and gentlemen, her attorneys don't dispute that she killed the children, but they're trying to go for a not guilty plea stemming from mental illness due to the fact in which the prosecuting attorneys argue that she was a premeditated intentional killer who can try to get her husband out of the house by sending him to get takeout into the pharmacy on that day, then strangle the children with the exercise bands. And prosecutor Shannon Buckingham urged jurors not to view the trial as a public debate about women's mental health and how the medical system treats women. And if convicted of murder, Clancy faces life in prison without parole. If found not guilty due to mental illness, she will be committed to a state mental health facility for the rest of her life, in which the attorneys say Clancy did everything she could to seek help. She turned to multiple outpatient providers, tried various guys to prescribe, called suicide hotline, went to an emergency room and approached, but wasn't accepted in the hospital-based full-day treatment program for women with post-pregnancy mental health problems. Clancy even checked herself into the psychiatric hospital for several days. Rather than improving, her condition worsened on the ever-remixed cocktail of psychiatric medications, some of them problematic for bipolar patients, her attorneys and families say. And the prosecutors aim to show that Clancy had access to a range of other mental health services, but sometimes ignored doctors' advice and stopped taking certain medications. And they brought several of her medical providers who testified she never talked about having a plan to harm herself or her children. Had she did, she would have been placed on involuntary confinement at a mental health hospital. They say she never showed signs of psychosis or mania, although she said she was having suicidal thoughts. A lot of juiciness, ladies and gentlemen. Juicy! Now, ladies and gentlemen, before I dig deep into my analysis, into the reason for why Lindsay Clancy is fully responsible, I do want to try and make sure I actually discuss this very, very carefully and craft it with nuance regarding this whole situation. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to try and dismiss, folks that deal with disabilities or folks that deal with learning disorders, any form of depression, any form of mental illness. These are the types of things you cannot really take lightly, whether it's any form of postpartum depression or whether it could be some form of insomnia or any other issues, or even CTE in certain cases, or even like something that deals with like a mental disease. Those are the things that you literally cannot take lightly. And I support anyone to actually go seek help in any way they can, as long as they're aggressive with their health, as long as they're aggressive very fully with actually taking care of their mental state. I support that 100% fully. Okay? I do fully have sympathy for someone that is actually deeply going through it and they have no intention of harming anyone else that has nothing to do with any internal traumas that they mainly have. However, what I do not have sympathy for, I have zero sympathy for anyone that usually offs anybody with no self-defense or even no retaliation that they actually struck them, okay? Literally get at an innocent person for no reason and snatch their life just because they're literally mentally out of whack. I have no sympathy for those types of people. Now, the exception is if that same person basically like offed your family or actually threatened to harm your family, actually harmed your family in any way that causes grave body harm that could literally be life-changing, okay? I can be more understandable with that. Or if they literally try to actually attempt to end your life, or in that person's life that's actually going through some type of mental disability or mental illness, I have much more understanding, I have much more sympathy at that point. But if that person simply did nothing to you, okay, no officiating, no none, whatever, did nothing to you, all right, nothing, I feel nothing for that person that actually did those acts, no sympathy whatsoever to these types of people, because at the end of the day, they made that choice to do what they mainly did. All right. Now, let's go dig into the situation regarding this case as to why this whole matriarchal nonsense on why Lindsay Clancy is this way is complete bullshit. Now, for the people out there that want to blame Patrick Clancy for the unalivings of his 3 children, given the situation regarding Lindsay, you know what I'm saying? How can he deliberately commit or plan the murders if he's going above and beyond to mainly support his wife, then wife at the time, and his 3 children to make sure that his wife is mainly okay so that she could be in good standing and good health? He even paid a nanny to take care of his 3 children prior to this unnecessary tragedy, unfathomable tragedy, senseless tragedy has been going on. He did everything that he could. He even worked from home just to make trust in mind of Lindsay and make sure that the kids are still okay as well. And mind you, when those unalivings took place, Patrick Clancy was at CVS going to try and run errands for his wife, while Lindsay literally committed the murders of her 3 children, which is what we need to focus on specifically, are those 3 children regarding that. Okay? And he has been hurt. Patrick has been traumatized, mainly down to the core. Okay? Yes, he publicly forgave Lindsay like three days later regarding the whole ordeal. And it's just really, really unfortunate. I'm not faulting him whatsoever on this. Because again, he did the best that he could, given the scenario. Could he done better? Absolutely. However, he did the best he could right at that very moment. And you can't really fault him, given the situation what went down, as he too is a victim in this whole scenario. Okay? Police investigated him and actually interviewed him due to the fact that he was a key player looking and literally trying to take down and indict Lindsay for those crimes. Okay, so obviously he's clearly not the guilty person. Okay, he clearly isn't. He's been doing his best, actually trying to take care of Lindsay all the way through and through. Now the relationship stats behind the scenes, I don't know if they run some sort of patriarchy or matriarchy. I don't know. I can't thoroughly assume. You know, that woman out here is really just yapping out of her mouth, literally trying to fuel the motive and literally trying to fuel an agenda. Okay? And to also correct this pseudo guru here, okay, regarding that statement that is saying that, oh, they remarried 4 months after the tragedy. That's a complete lie. Number one, Patrick divorced Lindsay shortly after she was indicted, as she was currently in jail. I think she's still in the mental health institution or the hospital facility, definitely at this time. Definitely within the year 2023, 2024, Patrick and Lindsay divorced, and Patrick ended up moving down into a penthouse up in New York City, trying to rebuild his life and actually trying to get everything set up while he's still grieving the loss of his 3 kids from his previous wife. Okay, he ends up getting somebody new. He ends up actually dating a very young woman. I forgot her name if I'm not mistaken. He dated a very young woman that's actually based in New York City, who was a physician in her own right. If I'm not mistaken, her name is Rachel. Correct me if I'm wrong if it's actually the right name. But they ended up eventually getting married about a year later and some change. They actually got married earlier this year, early in 2026. After about a year of dating and after somewhat of a year of an engagement, they officially married in February of 2026. And if I'm not mistaken, she could be expecting, I could be wrong. Let me try and double check to definitely be sure. Let me make sure I got my information right. Hang on a moment. Actually, I take that back. My apologies. They've yet to actually start having a family with his second wife. I take that back. All that stuff is like literally rumors, and all that stuff is literally social media. So let me not actually go there. All this is this hearsay of some nonsense over some woman that are just hell bent on actually trying to smear Patrick's name. All right, Patrick's actually still rebuilding his life while actually still dealing with the grief, and he has his own brand new support system coming from Rachel's family that's actually just treating him a much better job, guaranteed, than Lindsay ever could. You know what I mean? So, with that alone, him divorcing Lindsay, right? After the tragedies happened, after her mind state and after her mental state, could you really blame him for doing what he did? And mind you, she off his children that he shared with her. Okay? So can you fault him for wanting to actually split with her at that point due to the fact that she's more than likely going to be confined for the rest of her life? I wouldn't be surprised at all, and I would not fault Patrick for doing so. Now, I also do want to talk about in this video regarding the healthcare system that has its fuck-ups regarding the situation with Lindsay Clancy, and I'm also going to discuss that shortly, but I will also discuss the complexities regarding practicing healthcare when dealing with that type of matter, especially when you see a woman that's really trying to seek mental health while she's suffering while she's suffering from postpartum depression or any other form of postpartum depression. And mind you, postpartum psychosis is very, indeed, much rare, and a forensic psychologist definitely diagnosed her with that officially. Let me try and make that very clear. But there are some faults that other physicians could have done better, and also there are other things that also Lindsay could have done better had she not off those children. And we're going to get those into full detail regarding the matter. So, ladies and gentlemen, please, please, please bear with me as I go over through the notes that I took as I continue to watch some of this case and looked into some videos that actually have actual psychiatrists that were licensed that actually went through their points of view and basically what went wrong regarding the situation regarding Lindsay Clancy as a patient. Right? And there's faults to really go all around, with the exception of Patrick, because he did all that he could, and because he is not named in the healthcare proxy of Lindsay's, which we're going to actually definitely discuss later on, definitely in this video. We're not going to fault him right at that moment at all regarding this matter. So, we know regarding Mr. Clancy, he did all he could to save his wife and did everything the best that he could to make sure that she's in good condition. Her mental state is still good. Her nervous system is very well regulated and preserved. He did everything that he possibly could, and you can't blame Patrick for it. He even did like a fundraiser shortly after his kids' passings, right? And he made like nonprofit fundraisers actually trying and like bring more awareness to postpartum psychosis, which is a huge, huge deal, and very appreciative of Patrick for literally doing so regarding the matter. All right. Now, this is the big issue, and we're going to go with the healthcare side first regarding the healthcare providers, and we're going to dig first regarding the faults of what they done. All right. When Lindsay, went to Dr. Jennifer Tufts at the top Prospect Hospital that's really right outside Harvard, that's part of Harvard medical system, right? The doctors and then Dr. Jennifer Tufts initially misdiagnosed Lindsay, not thoroughly vetting if she has any signs of bipolar disorder or bipolar depression. And it wasn't just Jennifer Tufts alone. There were other doctors in the very beginning that heavily misdiagnosed Lindsay and not actually sniffing out the bipolar depression, while giving her medications that's actually meant to treat the symptoms that she has stated, ended up actually literally blowing back in her face and unfortunately ended up deregulating her Lindsay's nervous system and also deteriorating it, mainly as we speak, with cause reaction dealt with. It's not just the over medication part that's the issue. It's also being literally heavily intoxicated through meds, heavily poisoned through meds. That's also a big factor regarding that as well. It wasn't until a nurse basically gave her the proper diagnosis of bipolar disorder, and what we've stated mainly in the beginning of the video regarding this matter. Okay? And they tend to actually try and get a medication to actually try and neutralize the issue as well, but the hallucinations that have still been there have got so bad, literally bad, that Lindsay ended up making herself voluntarily confined to McLean Hospital, one of the top significant hospitals, mainly up in Harvard. And there's some people on TikTok that have complained regarding the doctors up at that hospital. And I'm understanding a bit as to why regarding that. And she stayed there literally for 5 days. And because the symptoms after the medication that actually make sure everything is fully treated, that actually treated her issues, and she got a bit better. And, you know, her mental state is actually getting back closer to equilibrium. The hospital nurses and doctors discharged her in time for her daughter's birthday. Lindsay was then referred back to Dr. Tufts, in which she was prescribed the same medication that she was mainly early on. That put Lindsay back in that position that she once had before. Now, this is where everything that may have been mainly screwed up. Regarding that, could the doctors have done much better at handling the situation better? Could the doctors done much better at actually trying to sense things out a little bit more clear and actually did more critical thinking as to why they got deteriorated and actually basically try to scale back their dosage and try to find other methods of medication? Absolutely. I fully agree with that. I really think that much of the doctors mainly fucked up their whole ordeal regarding the Lindsay Clancy case, which I will give much of the people that in regard to that. You know what I'm saying? But I also want to try and dig deep into the complexities of the healthcare system, and just take it for someone who's actually currently managing a private practice that has affiliated with big time hospitals up in the New York City medical area and is still learning as much as he goes, given this complex process that we mainly see now. A lot of doctors and nurse practitioners mainly see patients on upwards of 25 as high as 40 to 45 patients a day. If you're dealing with a lot of patients in the ER that could take up so much of your time, doctors and nurses rarely get any breaks. They rarely get any lunch breaks. They rarely have any time to actually try and relieve themselves up in the bathroom. It's mainly like a sprint throughout the day because they try to get as many as they can with those patients and try and get the best possible care and the best examination. And sometimes they do a thorough job actually trying to analyze the whole deal and actually try and do as much detail with them thoroughly diagnosing patients as much as they can And sometimes they can actually take longer than expected regarding that because they want to try and make sure they get their patients proper care. Other times they can mainly be pressed with time by higher ups that actually run hospitals, whether it's private equity, whether it's nonprofit, whether it's like top tier bosses. And mind you, insurance, when it comes to the billing as well, that could deal with a factor where it deals with claim rejection and how much they actually pay those doctors regarding those doctor visits. Those are huge factors mainly as well, which puts the doctor in so much pressure when it comes to seeing patients, with no guarantee that they're going to actually get their just due regarding their worth after having those patients seen, having those billed regarding those services that they mainly have done. Now, I'm not saying that I'm shifting the blame away from Dr. Tufts and many of the doctors regarding Lindsay's, but I want you to thoroughly understand the other side of the spectrum and what doctors mainly have to go through whenever they see patients, whenever they're under heat, seeing patient after patient after patient constantly, especially with like some psychiatric disorders of literally up in that matter, right? And it can vary from patient to patient. What one medication going to work for one patient isn't really going to be fully guaranteed to work for another. And that's unfortunately like the big drawback and the unfortunate situation regarding the whole nature of the healthcare business. And you also have to look into the insurance part and portion as well regarding the patient insurance. They could reject service based on that particular hospital doctor due to the fact that the doctor could be out of network or in network. You know, Lindsay, as a nurse that actually works in those hospitals, should be able to know all these things very, very well to the T. And then you factor in HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996. You factor that equation into that as well. Under the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, doctors and their practices and hospitals are required to protect patient privacy information. We consider that to be protected health information, or PHI for short. We are required to make sure that the patient sensitive information, whether it's addresses, phone numbers, data is coming regarding like healthcare readings, healthcare results, medications, social security numbers, insurance member ID numbers. We make sure all of that is kept in-house and not shared in front of the general public or anybody else without that patient's consent, without that patient legally sign a HIPAA release form, letting their respective state know, or even like the federal government know, or even other doctors know that I want my results released to this specific location regarding what records need to be done, regarding what specifics needs to be released. I want that from this long amount of time, and by state and federal law, we have to abide by that. So this is also part of the reason why there's a big disconnect regarding the mismedication regarding Lindsay Clancy's as well, due to the fact that she may not be able to actually give permission regarding data sharing regarding medical records being shared from previous doctor to previous doctor. I don't thoroughly know if that is actually the case or whether it's actually confirmed regarding that. If she has not done that, that is clearly on Lindsay. And we've been hearing other statements regarding the testimonies that she may not have been even fully honest to various doctors either as well. And that's also a big factor regarding the whole CIR health data sharing regarding medical records as well. That's what she's mainly liable for, and that's her primary responsibility. And not only that, Lindsay does not even have a healthcare proxy signed, or even have an active healthcare proxy in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, granting Patrick Clancy to be her primary caretaker to make medical decisions for her. She never granted him that permission whatsoever. There's no document records actually confirming that. So there's no way in hell that Pat should be blamed regarding for the murder of his 3 children because of those things. Keep him out of it. Keep his name out your fucking mouth. What Lindsay should have done, right? She should have signed HIPAA release forms to all her past doctors, wanting her medical records to be released. All her thorough medical records, including the ones from Dr. Jennifer Tufts. Those records should have been released to the new hospital that they're looking to go to, so that she'll be able to create a paper trail between doctors, physicians, and nurses, so that they'll be able to actually make a proper, thorough judgment to be able to look at the history of the past medications that she has used that may have caused the issues, so that they'll be able to actually make a thorough judgment on whether to mainly pull back or find something that's actually going to try and get her back to equilibrium state so that her nervous system doesn't get further damaged. She's actually done that, so all her doctors have all the thorough evidence that they need so that they can make a practical decision or a proper judgment call or make a proper judgment regarding medication on what to give to Lindsay Clancy. And that is clearly on Lindsay Clancy herself for not setting the tone regarding that. Now, her intents were good. Hers and Patrick's intents were very good to start. But again, she could have done much, much better because she herself is a primary patient and she holds primarily responsibility regarding her own health, especially regarding her own mental health. And she should have known better. Being a nurse and understanding the HIPAA system regarding that, she should have actually filed out and actually signed HIPAA release forms to all her old doctors to make sure that those records are thoroughly released to the new ones so that whenever she sees them, especially when the hospital sees them, they'll make a thorough call and they will do literally a thorough analysis just to make sure that she doesn't go further into a downward spiral regarding this matter. You know, this Lindsay Clancy trial reminds me of something somewhat similar in California that stems from the mid-2010s by a woman who's currently serving 3 life sentences in a California state prison by the name of Carol Coronado. She basically is serving 3 life sentences, suffering from the same thing that Lindsay Clancy is suffering from. The difference is she stabbed the kids, slit their throats, lied them on the bed, all 3 of her children, and she does not even recognize what caused her to do it. It's the same old stuff that Lindsay's possessing, but the thing is, it's in a different state. And the prosecution was very hell-bent and actually trying to put the responsibility mainly on the suspect, but not taking further action to actually mitigate her issues. And that's how she was found not guilty. The husband was basically like in Patrick's case, basically just being more forgetful. Maybe he could have done more. He did the best that he could as well around that time period at the moment while he was learning about her, Carol's condition. And he did the best that he could. You can't really fully fault him for all the effort that he put in towards raising his family and actually taking care of his family. Not as well whatsoever. But she's getting her mental medication, she's getting her mental health rehab up in state prison around that time. This has a similar feel as well. And you know what else is really having a similar feel? Up in the same county, in Plymouth County, in all places. That's basically where the case is taking place. The town is Duxbury, where the Clancys used to live prior to Patrick moving down to Manhattan. Duxbury is up in Plymouth County. Weymouth, that whole area, all that is Plymouth County. I have family residing there, Same issue happened stemming from 2018 by a woman by the name of Latasha Sanders.
Why are we comparing Latasha Sanders with Lindsay Clancy? I've seen it all over TikTok and Facebook and YouTube. People saying, I support this one, you need to support that one. Have you even heard about this particular case? Because I haven't. Now, before I jump into details, major trigger warning. Latasha Sanders was a mom in Massachusetts as well. And in 2018, she took the lives of her 2 sons. Her daughter actually found her in the kitchen panting after she had taken their lives. Multiple neighbors stated that she looked like she was completely gone. They thought that she was having a seizure. So they called emergency responders who quickly recognized that she was going through a psychological crisis. She goes to trial and she's found guilty, sentenced to life in prison without parole. Now, I want you to keep in mind that the prosecution actually hired a forensic psychologist who stated that Sanders has schizophrenia, paranoia type with delusions and hallucinations, and that she found it highly likely that Sanders was symptomatic at the time that she took the lives of her 2 sons. But the prosecution never called her to testify. Instead, during the trial, they argued that she was faking mental illness. They called her evil and accused her of playing the crazy card. The judge actually did not allow for her medical records to go into the trial, stating that she, in fact, was dealing with schizophrenia and severe hallucinations. She had gone undetected at a psychiatric hospital, at another hospital where she spent 4 years. However, finally, in September of 2019, they stated that she was schizophrenic with spectrum disorder. She had been dealing with voices since the birth of her first child. Thankfully, they have now vacated that sentence. They're going back to trial because the Supreme Court determined that the judge had committed a prejudicial error by not letting the jury hear about her mental illness while she was awaiting trial in a state psychiatric facility. I can tell you 2 good reasons why we didn't know about this case. First and foremost, the obvious: one is black and one is white. Why do I say that? Because statistics show that when you are black, you have to fight 2 times harder than anyone else to get justice. Second of all, I am a true believer, especially after watching trials for almost 4 years, that you're going to get a verdict according to how amazing your defense attorney is. Now, let's talk about the defense attorneys. She had Robert Shaw. He was a solid defense attorney, but he's no Kevin Reddington, who is one of Massachusetts' top most high-profile defense lawyers. She had an insanity defense. He has a postpartum psychosis defense, which gets national attention, versus hers, it excludes psychiatric evidence. Then we talk about the experience. While Robert is experienced, he's not known. Kevin here has decades of criminal defense work. And then lastly, public perception. Robert's got low visibility, while you're talking about Kevin over here is considered elite, and frankly, across the country especially.
Judge Sullivan also presided over the trial against LaTarsha Sanders, and there's a very interesting update that came out recently. Back in February 2018, LaTarsha Sanders took the lives of her 2 young sons, 8-year-old Marlon and 5-year-old LaSun. At her trial, there was not a question about who had done this. Instead, the question was around her criminal responsibility. There was no documented mental health history for LaTarsha prior to February 2018, but there was some evidence of her behavior changing recently. She had become consumed with conspiracy theories about the Illuminati. She thought that people were trying to poison her children, and she made statements that she felt she was being instructed by bad people. Her defense attorney testified that she was grossly psychotic and she lacked the capacity to understand the criminality of her actions or conform her behavior to the law. While Sanders was waiting on her trial, she spent years being evaluated and treated in prison and a state psychiatric hospital. There were thousands of pages of records documenting paranoia, delusions, hallucinations, and multiple psychiatric diagnoses. Those records included clinicians questioning schizophrenia spectrum disorders, a diagnosis of schizophrenia spectrum and other psychotic disorders, an assessment that her presentation was consistent with paranoid schizophrenia that had gone undetected and untreated for decades, and eventually she received a diagnosis of schizoaffective disorder. Her defense attorney tried to introduce these records during her 2022 trial, but this is where Judge Sullivan comes in. He did not allow them into evidence unless the prosecution first opened the door during cross-examination, which never happened, so those records were not admitted in trial and they were never handed over to the jury. Sanders was convicted by that jury, and she was sentenced to 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole. But then we fast forward to August 6, 2026. The Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court threw out those convictions unanimously and ordered a new trial. The court specifically found that Judge Sullivan's decision to exclude these psychiatric records was wrong and prejudiced Sanders' defense. The justices said excluding them impermissibly stripped her sole defense of the medical foundation supporting it, and that wasn't the only issue that they addressed. During the prosecutor's closing arguments, they suggested that because Law and Order SVU happened to be playing on the television when police were at Sanders' home, that maybe she had gotten ideas from episodes involving children and voodoo rituals. The Supreme Judicial Court said that argument was improper. There was no evidence that Sanders had watched those episodes, no evidence she had copied any storyline, and no evidence connecting what happened to the television show that happened to be playing later.
The DA's office has said that they are reviewing this ruling and deciding their next steps. So far, a new trial date has not been set. I believe in every defendant getting a fair trial, regardless of the crime, so I can't disagree with this decision. However, I don't personally feel that this case and this ruling can be used to make any comparisons to the Lindsay Clancy trial. It is the same judge, but we have heard so much evidence, we have seen so many documents, and it doesn't appear that Judge Sullivan has not allowed anything in that would compare to what happened in this case. But that is just my outlook on it. Let me know yours. Again, I believe every defendant deserves a fair trial, so I'll keep you updated on what happens with Latarsha's case, but most importantly, rest in peace to 8-year-old Edson Marlon Brito and 5-year-old Lasan Brito.
Who's black? Lindsay Clancy is white. Latasha Saunders murdered her 2 kids with knives, butchering them. Basically was charged with murder. She was basically sent off to a prison awaiting trial due to the fact that her mental health started deteriorating more and more. The state placed Latasha down to involuntary confinement, where they had their doctors diagnosing her with bipolar disorder as well as schizophrenia. Let me make sure I get the right information down. That's thoroughly there. Paranoia and schizophrenia, not bipolar disorder at all. She was diagnosed with medical record documentation while she was in involuntary confinement by a state health psychiatric facility that Judge William Sullivan, the same white judge that's presiding over the trial of Lindsay Clancy, as well as DA Timothy J. Cruz here, also a Republican. You have a Democratic judge and you have a Republican district attorney. Mind you, the Democratic judge here rejected the actual findings of the medical records and basically blocked the medical records from being shown by a jury, basically actually giving the DA more so leeway. The DA himself does not even want those medical records to be presented because both of them are mainly hell-bent to send another black woman to mainly do some sweat equity. That's what they mainly here to do. That's what their main end game is. And the jury convicted them. All white jury convicted her of the crime. And she's serving currently 2 life sentences for the murder of her 2 children, which those sentences and those convictions were vacated by a higher level court, in which they vacated those convictions, and which Latasha Sanders was eligible literally for a retrial, which will be coming in later on this year. I'm seeing the theatrics and I'm seeing the highlights of this Lindsay Clancy case, in which she's been going off over the place. She's been being pampered. She's been petted on by nurses while she's up in a wheelchair.
Here is a very long list of some of the rules in the Lindsay Clancy case that have been broken, and the special treatment and the special privilege that Lindsay Clancy is getting in a trial for a triple mask. So Lindsay does not have a standard formal mugshot. Can you imagine somebody that has done a triple mass and there's no formal mugshots? That is just insanity, the privilege. Lindsay used a cell phone while in custody. This is a big no-no. You are only allowed to use a jail phone system that is on a recorded line. Lindsay has remained in a hospital rather than a jail setting while awaiting her trial, despite never having psychosis. To this day, medical professionals have said that she does not have psychosis. Any other defendant that did a triple mass would be awaiting trial in a jail cell. This one is very alarming. Lindsay's lawyer either physically touched a witness during testimony or he touched a witness's chair, which has raised serious concerns about courtroom boundaries and manipulation tactics. Lindsay has interrupted proceedings, cried during testimony. She has yelled over the prosecution because she did not want the jury hearing about the autopsies. And any other defendant that would yell over the prosecution would have been removed from the room. The court has taken multiple breaks because of Lindsay Clancy. I have never seen this many breaks before. And court has ended early on at least one occasion because of Lindsay. Again, the privilege. It's making the trial go on longer, and it's taking away from taxpayer dollars. She has 2 nurses with her during this trial. When Lindsay Clancy was crying, these 2 nurses touched Lindsay Clancy. This crosses a line from medical assistance to excessive emotional supports. Again, these nurses went up to Lindsay when she was crying. She is a defendant. This is a triple mass trial. I have never seen a defendant have two nurses touch a defendant because they're crying. These nurses, in my opinion, are basically coddling Lindsay Clancy. Nurse generally should not touch a crying defendant in a courtroom. Courtrooms are formal legal settings with very strict rules. Touching a defendant could interfere with courtroom security, create a conflict of interest, or even compromise professional boundaries. Nurses must keep a clear line between clinical care and personal involvement. The nurse even moved Lindsay Clancy. The majority of courtrooms have very strict rules with security. Court officers control movements. I don't know why her nurse moved her.
It was basically a violation of conduct. You never see this type of treatment if it was a non-white person, especially a black person, that's literally facing trial up in a court like this. And Judge William Sullivan allowed it. He allowed those medical records of Lindsay Clancy to be placed onto the public for everyone to mainly view, unlike for Latasha Saunders. So both of their racism, right? Timothy Cruz and William Saunders are both at play, and which both of them definitely need to go. So why do I actually bring up race in this whole ordeal? Because there's so many non-white folks, especially so many non-white people that have undetected and undiagnosed mental health issues or mental illnesses that haven't been properly diagnosed by their doctors. A lot of them definitely non-white, okay? A lot of them basically like having their record, having their mental health issues and diagnoses dismissed by various doctors that don't even take them seriously. You know what I'm saying? When shit really hits the fan and they get charged and they get thrown by the full extent of law and get sent to jail and state prison, some of these people end up having undisclosed mental health illnesses as well that gets them sent to voluntary confinement. And then you got a lot of women, a lot of suburban white mothers, a lot of suburban white women, okay, that see themselves so much in Lindsay that they want to mainly literally blame their husband, despite him not actually murdering the children. Y'all come out and y'all have these solidarity posts. You literally give out money funding her $1 million as well as her parents. $1 million for murdering her 3 children. Literally. Children! Y'all are sick. And y'all got posts literally showing solidarity to this women. But many of them, while they showing that same level of solidarity towards them, many of them wouldn't even show that same level of support towards Latasha Sanders or any of these other non-whites that are actually going through the same level of mental health illness or even postpartum psychosis that Lindsay Clancy has mainly dealt with. Unless some of them, whenever they get put in heat and whatever happens with the case, who knows, because it's still ongoing. Some of them may still support Latasha Sanders. I don't know. But given their culture, and its culture, it's like an oppressive culture that they got going on, right? Like anyone that has a white supremacist mindset has an oppressive culture that's going on, so that whenever we're not around, they basically place their culture, basically practice their culture on other folks that are different than them, or if they were in the same group and no other people is around, they focus on basically getting on someone that has a disadvantage over them, or at least a slight difference over them just because they're different. Because they can't help themselves. Many of them can't help themselves, man. They don't know how to be without it. And you're seeing this hypocrisy mainly up in full display. Whenever a black person goes through like a mental health crisis or even a mental health issues, you know, they mainly actually just turn a blind eye. They say, oh, fuck you, move on, goodbye, right? And even, right, if you have even Chris Benoit, a white male that completed a murder-suicide, okay, you would have no sympathy for him either, okay? And it comes to find out that he was literally diagnosed with CTE while he's literally just doing like his fights in his rings whenever he was wrestling, doing all, again, getting repeat blows to the head whenever he's up in the ring over a period of time. And that's years. Not many of them would have that much sympathy for Chris Benoit. The reason why many of these women mainly support Lindsay Clancy, and a lot of them don't support other women that actually have the same issues that are definitely different uniformly, is because they mainly see themselves and they mainly see a culture through them. that they feel like they're more superior over everybody else, given their internal biases, given their internal mindsets on what they see themselves as. This is why they mainly try to protect themselves onto this person and actually live life vicariously through them and support them wholeheartedly, just to make sure that they get things in their favor, just to show their culture. You know what I'm saying? That's why you're seeing that woman up in that TikTok mainly just go off saying, oh, the patriarchy did it. Oh, Patrick Clancy did it. It ruined mainly Lindsay Clancy's life. No. It is the fault of Lindsay Clancy primarily for not fully utilizing the healthcare system to her full advantage to make sure that she thoroughly gets up to her knees so that she doesn't even reach to this point. And when you bring 3 innocent little beings, innocent young kids that haven't even heard of fly, they just want to just go live life, have fun, play around, go at the playground, play video games. You take their lives for no reason. I have zero sympathy for you. I don't even care if you have a disability or a mental illness or not, because it's on you at this point. Just as I have zero sympathy for Latasha Saunders and Chris Benoit for them choosing to literally take innocent lives for no reason. Even though I could call it the hypocrisy, I have no sympathy for them either, because they should have actually took more further action to actually try and handle the issues to see if something like this mainly went wrong. They should have took action right before the fact that they mainly came down and actually sought the help before it even reached that point. Lindsay Clancy herself could have gotten herself back to voluntary confinement for a while due to the fact of herself not feeling good, or she could have actually got herself another relative to actually mainly help take care of the kid, or have Patrick take care of her, or could have Uber Eats mainly drop off their stuff in pharmacy while Patrick oversees her, makes sure everything is still all good and everything is all straight. Instead, no. She sent Patrick to actually mainly handle her stuff through, handle her errands mainly through her, go through her takeout, get her stuff that's there instead of doing the Uber Eats and actually do the delivery. You know what I mean? She could have done that, and she ended up actually killing those 3 children while Patrick was away. She could have brought other family members, even brought the nanny to take care of the kids and check up on her if she's still struggling, if she's still feeling iffy. She could have done that. You know what I'm saying? Because she's the one that primarily needs help. So no, I feel no sympathy for Lindsay Clancy whatsoever. Now, if she's found guilty by the jury, lock her ass up, throw away the key, have her serve 3 life sentences. I don't give a fuck. Serves her right. If she's found innocent due to insanity or however insanity plea they have, because she clearly did the murder. Clearly did. But if she's not guilty through the reason of insanity, I hope they get her in a psychiatric facility or a hospital facility where she's able to serve her the rest of the days for the rest of her life. Because she's going to need all that assistance she's going to mainly get because she's paraplegic, but she's going to be stuck there for the rest of her life, counting her days. You know what I'm saying? I have no sympathy for people that choose to take innocent life that hadn't done nothing. Nothing! And that's the situation that really icks me and that really pisses me the fuck off. You know what I'm saying? So no, this is not a patriarchy issue regarding Lindsay Clancy, and this is not even a matriarchal issue, but mainly women running their own show. These are the decisions of one individual, one human being. Yes, she has an issue with the mental health, and I also want to actually try and bring some up. I personally tutored a teen that went through bipolar depression, and the parents basically gave me on game and gone how insane whenever they feel ignored, all bets off when their monsters off, and that basically gave me a lesson learned on how to actually mainly curb my anger. You know what I mean? Because they can literally go off the rails when they get pissed the fuck off. And I have an older cousin that's really gone full on road, fully acting a fool, gone insane because she refused to take her medication. She's suffering from bipolar depression. And she's still acting a fool. She's been disrespectful to my parents, my sister, my aunt, acting a fool, thinking that she's entitled to everything and acting so crazy, thinking that everything's going to be given to her. When she don't get her way, she becomes manipulative. She becomes very narcissistic. I can sift these types of people from literally miles away. I can feel them because I personally lived that part of the whole ordeal myself. So, give it an narcissism that she may have done. She could have done any other opportunity. And she could have any other choice that she could have done. Other than offer her 3 kids. Or if she really feels that she needs help, she could have asked Patrick to stay and take care of her. She didn't do it. That's why the position that she's currently in right now. No more talk for me, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to let the rest of the juiciness mainly play out.